Hello and welcome back to the Complete Web Dev series. In this video, we're talking in this chapter, we're talking about object-oriented programming, and we're doing that through the lens of PHP. But a lot of the concepts that we learn with object-oriented programming in PHP apply to other languages as well. So we're just learning the syntax for it. We're not going to get super deep. I don't expect you guys to understand everything about object-oriented programming. I'm just kind of wetting the palate, as you would say, just to kind of like open you up a little bit to the syntax and maybe some of the terminology, and then we're going to build an entire project in the next chapter using object-oriented programming. So I think a lot of it will click then. But in this specific video, what we're doing is we're talking about visibility. And before I do that, let me just say that if you guys are liking this series, if it means something to you, please leave me a comment, click the like button. Also check out my merch. You can go to freeskills.life, or a lot of times underneath the video even, you'll see links to my merch on Teespring. I'm wearing my hat right here. It's Free Skills. I think they're pretty cool. So if you guys want to get a hat, I got shirts, hoodies, mugs, everything like that. So enough plugging myself. Let's talk about visibility. So what is visibility first of all, and why do we need it? Well, let's imagine for a second that, okay, so you know that an object is a container basically that holds properties and methods to deal with those properties. And we need to be able to decide what has the ability to access those properties inside the object. We need to be able to decide what can update those properties inside the objects. And that's where we come into visibility. Think of visibility as like permissions basically for your properties and methods inside of your objects. So let me go ahead and switch over to my screen now, and we'll get going. The first thing I'm going to leave this, but let's just go ahead and let's create a new. I'm just going to go ahead and, well, we'll just hit new, and let's create a file called visibility.php. And we can close the index.php. We're not going to need that. Well, actually, in fact, go ahead and open that up and copy the new line function and that opening PHP tag there, and then put that in this visibility. All right, that'll just make it a little easier for us to put new lines in. All right, so the next thing that we want to be able to do is create a simple class. And so let's just create a class called person. And inside this class, what we're going to do is we're going to give this a property. We'll just call this eyes. And we'll set this property equal to blue. All right. The next thing that I want to do in this class is let's create, well, you know what? Let's just for now, well, let's create a method. Let's create a method called, we'll call it set eyes. And actually, this is a public function, set eyes, and then it's going to take a color, and what we're going to do is set this eyes equal to that color. So this is a very simple and kind of dumb class, but what's happening here is we have an object with a property called eyes and a method called set eyes, and we can pass a color into this, and what's going to happen is it's going to take this dot eyes and set it equal to the color. So let's just try something here. Let's try outside of this function. Let's just echo, well, let's create a new person. So we'll say person, we'll set up a variable and set that equal to new person. So we'll instantiate that object, and then what we're gonna do is just echo person eyes. All right, so we'll save that, and let's go back to our browser, and let's just refresh there. And what we get here, or visit visibility.php, and what we get here was just echoing out blue. So let me show you something. This is outside of the class. So our class is right here. Here's our opening and closing brackets here. This is outside of the class, and we are accessing that property eyes right here. And the reason that we're able to access this outside of this class is because the visibility of this is set to public. Now there are three options that we have when we're setting the visibility of a property or a method. And the three that we can use are public. Let me go ahead and create a class or a little comment here. We can use public, or we can use private, or we can use protected. Okay, so we have these three different visibilities that we could use. Public allows everything. It allows things inside this class and outside this class to access it and even manipulate it. Let me show you an example of that. So if I go now and we'll echo that out, I'll echo a new line. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to say person eyes is equal to brown. And then we'll echo person eyes again. And if we go back now to our browser and refresh, now you can see that at first we're echoing out blue, but then we are manipulating the value of that property inside that class, or that object rather, and then we're echoing again, and it has indeed been changed. And so you got to be careful with public, because public allows you to, outside of your class, you can manipulate values in here and you can access them. But what happens now if I change this from public to private? Well, if I refresh, I get a fatal error. And I'm actually getting this on line 17, as you can see. And line 17 is the first echo. So we can't even echo or access this property because, oops, sorry, wrong way. We can't because it is private. So setting this to private says, hey, only stuff inside of this class, inside this object, has even access to this. Everything else that tries to access it outside of there, we're going to throw an exception. We're going to throw a fatal exception. We're going to clear, or sorry, we're going to stop the application. So this protects you from and it protects you from having other classes change this value, because this value may be an important value, you know, that you're saving in a property. If you have a shopping cart object or something like that, you don't want the price to be manipulated outside of the class. You want something in the class that is aware of everything to manipulate that. And you may not want anything else outside of the class to even access it, and that's where private comes into play. Now, if I change that to protected, we get the exact same fatal error, and that's because protected and private are the same visibility for the most part. There is a slight difference between the two, which we'll talk about in just a moment, but just understand that private and protected will stop you from accessing and manipulating properties and running methods outside of this class, okay? So let's talk about the difference. What is the difference now between a protected and a private visibility? So let's create another class here, and we'll call this a children. And this is going to extend, so this is a child class from person. So by default, if this stuff is set to public now, this class here, since it extends this, it gets all of this stuff. Okay, so you can think of it just like people. That's why I chose to switch over to people for this, because with visibility, if you have something that's public, everyone has access to it, okay? If you have something that's protected, then only stuff in the family has access to it, okay? So there's things like that in your life that, you know, you want to pass down to your kids. Well, that would be pretty, but you don't want it being open to the public. Well, you know, like maybe your bank account when you die or something like that. That would be considered protected. You're giving it to your children. If it's something you don't even want your children to access, then that's private. There's things in your life that your children shouldn't know about, your children shouldn't be able to change, and those would be private. So the difference between private and protected is basically how the children of that class behave with that. And so private, you will not be able to access private methods from a child class, but protected ones you can. Okay, so that's the difference between public, private, and protected. Let me just show you a few examples of this. So let's set this now to protected. And let's create a new public function here, because we need access to this, and we're just going to call this get eyes. So since that's public, we need a way outside of it to get information on there. So we'll just return this eyes here. And now down here, instead of just echoing person eyes, what we can do is we can just echo person get eyes, and we'll use a getter. Wow. All right, so that should work. And then here, instead of manipulating eyes with brown, what we can do is we can use our setter, and we'll say set eyes, and we'll pass brown in as a parameter instead of setting it directly with an assignment operator. And then we'll echo that again. So now if I go back and refresh, we get blue here. This one says you cannot access a protected property eyes. Let me see what I did wrong there. Oh, I'm just echoing it here. So we need to change that to get eyes as well. So let's refresh that. So now we are manipulating this, but this code outside here isn't manipulating this property actually. It's calling a public function that we gave it access to called set eyes, and this set eyes function is within the object. It is setting this protected method. So let's go ahead now and let's just take a look at what this child would do now. So what I'm going to do is create a variable called child, and we'll do a new children. And here what we're going to do is let's echo child get eyes. Oops, I put the, wow. Guys, I'm really sorry. I'm really tired or something. I just did something crazy. I don't even know what I did there. Okay, so we got blue. I didn't use a new line here, so let me just put a new line. We'll refresh, and now you got blue. Now this is the child right here that's echoing that blue out. And that's happening because this is protected. So what would happen now if I set on this child element, if I set this to protected, well, hang on. Let's keep this as public. And then what I want to do actually, let's move this get eyes function into the child. And then now I'm going to save that and refresh. And person no longer has it. So let's just go ahead and comment this code out, because what I'm trying to illustrate here. All right, so now we have this blue, and that is because this is being inherited down into this child class here, this eyes, because it's protected, and we have a function here that's getting that. But if I set this to private and we refresh, we get this undefined property children eyes and the visibility, because since this is private now, the child class cannot access that even with this public function, because this eyes, when this was inherited down, this was private. So this doesn't have access. The children do not have access to private elements in the, even from the derived class. So but with protected they do. So that's the difference between private and protected. And look, this is kind of a stupid, silly example because it's not showing you real world examples really about why you would do this stuff. And so we'll dig this deeper when we build the next application. But for now, just understand that there's three visibility settings that we can use before our methods and our properties. And if you don't choose one, the default is public. But public everything has access to access and run methods inside of a class with public. The children get it when it's inherited. With private and protected, only things inside of the classes have access to it. But with private, the child does not have access to the parents, and vice versa, their properties. So just keep that in mind. That's the difference between public, private, and protected. And that's all we were going to cover in this video. We'll continue on in the next video. Hope you guys are having fun. If you're confused, don't let it frustrate you too much. Let's just move on.